Hello, everybody, and welcome to Persistence Playbook. Today's guest is a best-selling author. He's a multi-time TEDx speaker, a podcaster as well, and he helps entrepreneurs build self-operating profit machines. And today we're going to try and answer the question, how can we grow our businesses while also maintaining balance in our lives? Jason Duncan, thank you for being on the show, my friend.
It's an honor. Always love doing shows, and I'm excited about this one.
Let's go. Let's go. So you started your journey way back when, actually as a pastor and a school teacher. And at some point you decided to try this whole entrepreneurship thing and you built a multi-million-dollar business that was actually featured in Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing privately held companies in all of America. Tell me a little bit about that.
So, I spent 13 years in high school, college, and then, afterwards, those 13 years being in pastoral ministry. And, I've got a degree in biblical studies and ministry, and that's what I thought I was going to be for the rest of my life. But I got to a point where I was fed up with what I refer to as the machine of the Western church. And I said, man, I just can't do this anymore. So I got out of that and I went back to school to become a teacher. I got a master's in education, started teaching 8th grade American history. And again, thought, all right, I want to be here forever. I love teaching. So as you can see, I had this penchant for choosing high income careers. so, so, so when I was teaching school, man, I fell in love with the craft of teaching and taking complex concepts and breaking it down and telling stories so that my students could understand. And I thought, man, this is the best thing ever. Well, the Great Recession had other plans because the Great Recession caused a lot of teachers to lose their contracts due to budget cuts in school districts. And I was one of those guys. Even though I was the number one teacher in the county in my subject area, I was a model teacher. I was highly qualified in several different subject areas, and I had my administrator's license. So I was planning on being in education for the rest of my life. So when I didn't have that opportunity to continue to stay in education, why not start a business? I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how to spell entrepreneur. I didn't know what entrepreneur was. But I started a business primarily out of the need for survival, financial survival. So I started a business, and that business, lo and behold, over the next couple of years, just grew into a multi-million-dollar business. And it was like, I can't believe this is my life. And I think it was probably, Brett, it was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years in before I realized that I was an entrepreneur. Like I literally just had a job that I owned and I was doing things. And that's the start of my entrepreneurial career. And then, of course, there's a lot more that led us up to today.
I love it. I love it. And spelling entrepreneur is hard. I still screw that one up from time to time.
Lots of E's and U's, man. I don't know which one goes where.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough one. I'd rather just go with, business owner, but yeah, entrepreneur definitely sounds a little bit cooler. So you talk a lot about, tier one entrepreneurship where business kind of comes at the cost of personal freedom. And how do businesses ascend from this tier, to a place where they can win in business, but also enjoy some of their personal time?
Man, that is a great question. You've obviously done your homework, different than a lot of hosts of shows. So congrats on doing that. So there's three tiers. There's 3 tiers to this entrepreneurial evolution. Tier 1 is where most entrepreneurs are. I'd say 90% of entrepreneurs stay in the tier 1, and that is owner operator. And that's what I was. I would say that 90% of your listeners are probably owner operators, and there's nothing inherently wrong with it, as long as you understand, okay, that's what it is. And I'm fine with that. Although there are a lot of cons to that. There's pros, but there's a lot of cons to that. But this owner operator tier, if you look at it as a triangle, so the bottom tier of the triangle is the widest, and that's where most entrepreneurs live. And they're focused on activity. They're not focused on anything else. It's like, I just show up every day, I work, and I make a decent living. Because let's face it, most entrepreneurs make more money than everybody else. Some entrepreneurs are grinding out and don't make anything, but most entrepreneurs are making something. I mean, I don't know how long it took, but to get into, I think it was like our second year, I got into 6 figures. Now, coming from teacher and pastor, like getting into the $100,000 range was unobtainable before. And now here I am. And then, 250, 350, 400, like it continues to grow. But I was still tier 1. Tier 2 in the middle, some entrepreneurs graduate into tier 2, and that is owner manager. And an owner manager is less involved in the daily activities, but they're still crucial to the daily operations. So they might not be doing the sales, they might not be doing the development, they might not be doing the creation of whatever is being created, but all of that still relies upon them, their personality, and their know-how to get it done.
Sure.
And they're just focused on managing stuff. Then the smallest number of entrepreneurs move into what I refer to as tier 3, and that's at the top of the triangle. And that is an owner investor. And this is the guy or the girl, as it were, who owns the business, is involved to whatever degree he or she chooses, but irrespective of their involvement, the company continues to scale. The company continues to grow. The company continues to be profitable, but it doesn't need that entrepreneur, that person, to be involved in daily operations. He or she should still be involved in vision casting, setting the vision, communicating the vision, building the asset, but he's not involved in the dailies. And that is what I think all entrepreneurs should strive for, because let's face it, there are no billionaire owner operators. All the billionaires out there are owner investors. They've reached that status. So whether you want to be a billionaire or not, if you want to reach success, you've got to get into the top tier. You got to be tier 3.
I love that. That's a great way to break it down. I think most business owners, people running their own business, do fall into the bottom of that triangle, as the owner operator. And in a sense, you're not even running a business. You've just kind of created a job for yourself, right? You're just exchanging time for money in a very straight up transaction there. Curious for all the people listening that are in that bottom tier. And we're not even really, thinking about the top of the triangle yet, but just how do we ascend to that second tier, to that owner manager? What tactically can we do to make that happen?
So first of all, if you look at this methodology that I created that takes you through the ascension of tier 1 to tier 3, it's called XOS. It stands for Exeter Operating System. And for those that might be watching this, that's what's on the wall behind the XOS. The XOS system.
Great logo too. That is sharp right there, man.
Thank
XOS rolls off the tongue. I mean, that's good.
So the XOS method is designed. Exeter Operating System is designed to take you from tier 1 to tier 3. Now, no matter where you are in that evolution of the entrepreneurial world, you can start wherever you need to start. But if you're in stage 1, tier 1 of the entrepreneurial evolution, you're an owner operator. The first thing you really got to work on is your mindset. And that mindset is going to be prevalent throughout the entire process of all 7 stages of the XOS method. You've got to work on mindset, because if you believe that you're the hero of your business and you act as the hero of your business, you will always stay in tier 1. I call it the hero syndrome. The hero syndrome is, look, I am the guy that can show up and save the day no matter what happens. While that is true in the early stages of most businesses, it can't be true forever. If you look at Elon Musk, if you look at Jeff Bezos, if you look at the guys that are running the multi-trillion-dollar companies now in the world, they moved beyond the mindset of being the hero of the business a long, long time ago. They don't yet do that. So mindset is the blanket. So if you look at, or umbrella. So if you look at the 7 stages of the method, mindset's not a stage. It is the umbrella over which everything exists. So, but tactically, Brett, the first thing that an entrepreneur who's stuck in tier 1 entrepreneurship is that he or she needs to work on basic delegation. And what basic delegation is going to do is it's going to focus you on reclaiming time that you're spending on activities that aren't really generating any movement for the company. So I believe, and I've seen it happen not only in my own life, but in the lives of my clients and the lives of hundreds of other people that I've worked with or influenced or talked with or spoke to, is that you can get down to 10 to 20 active hours in your business pretty quickly. Now, what is an active hour? One active hour is an hour that is required for you to continue to keep the business moving. That's an active hour. So in my coaching business, my active hours are probably somewhere around 15 to 20 at the most. Now I work more than 15 or 20 hours a week. Let's be clear. But let's say it's 15 and I work 40 total. So I got 15 active. Well, that leaves 25 non-active hours that I can now use to build the asset of my coaching company, create new content. I can start writing my next book. I can work on new ideas about. How do I create a new program for this? Those aren't required to keep my business operating and producing money, but it takes my business to the next level. And I've seen it happen dozens of times. I'm working with a client right now who is in a blue collar industry. When he came to me, he was working 60 plus hours a week. He was at his wit's end. He was done. And now, a year later, active hours in the business, he's around 20. And he's still working 40, sometimes more than 40 per week. Sure. But now the quality of what he's doing with the most of his hours every week is building recurring revenue. It's building opportunity to generate higher levels of profitability, building new teams, building new systems, creating the empire. Because let's face it, as entrepreneurs, we do make more than most people, but you're never going to be wealthy on high income. It's what you do with the high income that makes you wealthy. So he's got a high income, but now we're trying to figure out how do we leverage that high income to create generational wealth. And he's going to do that with these extra hours that we found in his day. That's stage one of the XOS method. That is basic delegation.
I love it. I love it. And if you're working in your business 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, there's just not going to be time to work on your business and really scale it to something special. So it's important to kind of try and bring those active hours down a little bit. So you've got some time to really build the systems and processes necessary to build that empire, whatever you're looking to do. And I think that is really good stuff. And you mentioned the word mindset there a couple of times. So I want to dive in to mindset a little bit. You said it's the umbrella that hangs over the entire operation. And I totally agree with that. I've heard you say that we only have control over the way we think. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. How can we be better at thinking positively, staying focused on our long-term objectives, and not just getting so distracted by the low-hanging fruit?
So the question is, how do we focus more of our thoughts on being positive rather than being sucked into the negative thinking?
Positive, right? How do we just control our minds in a way that we're really, utilizing our brains and our minds in a way that pushes us towards our goals? Like, what do you do within that process?
Well, I'm really glad that you brought this up because I am in the process right now of getting certified as a Napoleon Hill certified coach and leader. And the process of that is really, really enlightening because it is focused on positive mental attitude, about the power of our thoughts. And I do believe that God only gave us complete control over one thing, and that's how we think. That's how we think about things. And so thoughts can come into our mind and those thoughts come from other people, other influences. But what we do with that information is totally under our power. It's totally under our ability to do it. So I 100% believe that. So as an entrepreneur or a human in general, but specifically since we're talking to and for entrepreneurs today, as an entrepreneur, what are you going to do to stay focused on what is positive? Well, here's what I read this in a book. I think it was I don't know if it was in Psycho-Cybernetics, which is a fantastic. Have you read that book, Psycho-Cybernetics?
I've certainly heard of it. I have not read that one.
Phenomenal book. Everybody needs to go get a copy of that right now. I've read it at least twice. I think I'm on my third reading. Fantastic. I don't know if it was in that book or what was the other book? The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace Wattles. I don't remember. That's another great book. The Science of Getting Rich is great. You skip chapter 1, but everything else is fantastic. Chapter 1's terrible. I want to redo that book, do a modern version of it and just skip chapter 1 because I think chapter 1's terrible.
I think that's the first time I've ever heard that as far as someone recommending a book is like, you have to read this book, but just start at chapter 2.
Start at chapter 2. Chapter 1's terrible. But so either it was in one of those two books. I think it was in one of those two books where the author was talking about the power of mindset and how we cultivate a positive mental attitude. And the idea was, okay, let's talk about what a diet is. Okay, so if any of us ever go on a diet, what do? We restrict certain foods. That's what a diet is. So we look at, hey, I want the donut, but I'm on a diet. I will restrict myself. I want X, but I'm not doing sugar, so I'm not going to eat X, whatever that X is. That's what a restriction is. So what a lot of nutritionists will tell you to do is do a food journal for a week or two before you start a diet or before you start a nutrition program. So what this author was talking about, he said, just like we do in diets, he said, you need to treat your mental thoughts and habits like a diet. So what you should do for 30 days is, I don't know if he said 30 days, maybe it was a week, is for a week is write down every time a negative mental thought enters your brain. And negative is just not woe is me. Negative could be anything you don't want to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like I heard somebody say, man, I hope I don't get a flat tire on the way to work. Why would you even say that? That doesn't even make sense that you would verbalize it, but that's a negative thought, right? So what you need to do for 7 days is do a journal, write down every negative thought just so that you can realize how many you're having. Cause we have them a lot if you're not training your brain. So do that first. Now, once you've done that, then go on a 30-day mental diet, And the mental diet is you do not allow yourself, you do not allow yourself to dwell on any negative thought, which is defined as anything you do not want to happen or that has a negative consequence or outcome. So we can't prevent negativity from coming to us because it happens. The enemy, Satan, is going to feed all kinds of accusations about how terrible you are, how bad you are, how fat you are, how terrible of a human you are. The enemy is going to do that through humans, through phones, through phone conversations, through text messages, through YouTube videos, through podcasts, through books you read, through news outlet. Stop watching the news, by the way, and you'll get a much better positive attitude. But the enemy is going to do all this. But your job is to restrict your ability or desire to dwell on it. Okay, something bad happened. I acknowledge it. So I'm not living in fantasy land like it didn't happen. I'm not ignoring it, but I'm not dwelling on it. So the idea then is after 30 days, you have now cultivated a habit of repelling, of pushing away negativity when it comes to you. I've done this, really diligently over the last 2.5 years. And I could tell you in the past 6 months, how many bad mental days I've had, maybe one. Because I have trained my brain to not dwell on negative thoughts. I had a really uncomfortable conversation with my attorney yesterday about some business issues that are still present from something that happened 8 months ago. And man, like a weaker Jason would have taken that and just been like, oh crap. And, just the rest of the day would be terrible. And I'd wake up this morning depressed. But I was like, okay, I acknowledge it. I refuse to dwell on it. And then I can move on.
I love it. That's a really powerful process that anyone that kind of struggles with negativity, or maybe you don't even think you have a problem with negativity, is something almost anyone I think could benefit, right? Is to journal your negative thoughts over that week or 20 days, whatever it is, and then really go on a negativity diet. And listen, you can't control what comes into your minds, whether an idea just pops up or you hear something on the news, but you can control whether or not you're going to follow that negativity on a tangent. I think that's a really powerful process that I think anyone could benefit from. And what would you say, as far as yourself, and you're a very successful guy, you've been successful, in starting your own businesses, you host mastermind retreats, you're a TEDx speaker. How much of your day would you say your mental capacity is focused on pushing forward your business? Are you thinking about it all day long? Would you say it's almost like a healthy obsession, or are there times in your day where you're not thinking about business at all?
I think the short answer to that is yes. I think about it all the time. I think entrepreneurs are just wired that way. It's constant improvement, constant iteration. It's always there. That being said, I live what I refer to as a balanced life. There are times and that I can shut it completely off and pay attention to what's more important to me, which is my wife, my relationship with my kids, my relationship with friends, my health. Those are things that are all more important to me than my business. My faith is the most important thing. My relationship with my wife is second. My relationship with my kids is third. And then you continue on down the thing, and business is involved in that. But it's not the most important thing, although it takes up most of my time. It is the thing that I focus on. I get up every morning. I get up at 6 o'clock, which is a new thing for me. I used to not set an alarm at all, but I've just recently decided, I had a long talk with God. I'm like, God, what do you think I need to be doing? And so I felt like he said, okay, get up at 6 o'clock every day. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm being obedient. So I get up at 6 o'clock every day and I go for a walk. I do about 3.5 miles. And when I walk, it's my time with God. It's my time to do my affirmations, my time to think about business, think about what's going on. And this morning on my walk, I was walking and I got 3 notifications from one of my marketing partners that I work with, and it was 3 voice messages in our chat group that we have, and I just listened to those, and then when I listened to those, then I sent him a chat. I sent him that. So like that's not normal. I don't normally do business when I'm walking, but if it happens, it happens. But I'm
Sure.
always thinking about how do I serve my clients better, and let's be frank, how do I make more money? Like like how do I generate more revenue as a result
Sure.
of this? I mean, so yeah, it's a healthy obsession, but I live a balanced life enough that I'm not a guy that's a workaholic who can't turn it off and he's always on his phone and he's not paying attention to his family. I'm not that guy.
I love it. I love it. And I think that, right, there is a balance there, and a majority of your hours can certainly be spent on furthering your business, becoming more useful to people, providing greater service. Because I do think as men, there's a big part of us that is just, we're made to work. Like, I just think innately we feel our best when we know that we're putting together great service and being as useful to society as we possibly can. But then, yeah, I think there is time where you can spend it with God, where it's just you and him, or it's just you and your wife, or you and your kids, and you're being completely present. And I think that's where the balance lies there. And I think that that's kind of what, at least how I feel about balance as an entrepreneur. And you touched on your faith there. And I think it's just worth talking about a little bit. How important would you say, your faith is in your ability to build the businesses that you've been able to build thus far in your life?
Well, I look at it as it's the center of who I am. So I have this talk that I do about how work-life balance is a myth. As a matter of fact, I'm flying out to California in a couple of weeks, and that's the talk I'm going to be giving there. And I do it with I actually have props that I use to demonstrate balance, because most people believe that work-life balance. They talk about this work-life balance, but they forget that life is part of work.
Sure.
I mean, work, excuse me, I said that backwards. Work is part of life. Like you can't, life is life. And then everything we do is part of life. So you can't put work on one side of the teeter totter and life on the other and hope that they balance out, because,
Well,
because without life, there is no work.
right.
So I believe that instead we should focus on building a balanced life around the things that are most important to us and work out from there. So for me, the most important thing is my relationship with Jesus. I've been a follower of Jesus my whole life. I make no bones about it. I do not present myself as a Christian coach or a Christian anything, but Jesus is the center of who I am and what I do. And so I will not apologize for that. I'm not going to proselytize, but I am going to make that the center of who I am. So everybody who works with me knows that's who I am and what I build my life around. So that's the center. Right outside of the center is my relationship with my wife. Like that's the most important human relationship I have on this planet. So I make sure that I pay attention to her more than any other human, including my kids. I've got adult children now. My son's 24, my daughter's 21. Like I make sure that I do not neglect them because they're important to me. And then beyond that, there's extended family and friends. And then there's business. So I want my business to be a reflection of all the other important relationships in my life. I don't want to build a life around business. I want to build my business around my life.
Love that. I can relate to that on so many levels. And, I want to just kind of touch on quickly productivity. You're a guy that gets a lot done, right? You're speaking at TEDx, you're coaching people one-on-one, you're hosting masterminds, you're making content, you're hosting podcasts. I mean, you got a lot of projects going on a weekly basis, Jason. And I've heard you talk about your 10-block weekly scheduling method. And I'm curious if you could just kind of go into exactly what that entails.
So I had a mentor or coach of mine a long time ago talk about just power blocks of time. And it was the first time I'd ever heard anybody talk about it. And his idea was, look, spend out of your hour, do 45 minutes of just solid focused work. And then the next 15 minutes, get up and take a walk, go talk to an employee, do something, and then come back and do 45. And so that was the first time I'd ever heard about blocking your time to just really focus.
Sure.
So what I did with that is I took and did an iteration of it, and I turned it into something I now refer to, as you said, the 10-block weekly scheduling method. And so that with that method, what I do is I make sure that I have 10 blocks in my week. Monday morning and afternoon are 2 blocks. Tuesday morning, afternoon, 2 more blocks, etc. So for 5 days a week, there's 2 blocks in each day. There's a morning and an afternoon. And what I've done is I've decided that there's only certain things that I will do in each block individually. So on Friday morning, which is where we're in right now, it's Friday morning for me as we're recording this. I'm looking at the bottom of my computer screen right now. There are 5 Post-it notes, Monday through Friday, and it's divided in half. And I can look at what do I allow myself to do on Friday mornings. Write content. I do in-person meetings and Zoom calls. I do some personal tasks. And then I've got 2 other companies that I own that I do check-ins with. That's it. So if it's not one of those things, I don't do it on Friday morning. I just don't do it. So if somebody called and said, hey, we need to work on our financial plan for blah, 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 on Friday morning, don't do it on Friday morning. I look into my 5-10 blocks and go, when do I do stuff like that? Okay, I do that on Tuesday afternoons. Okay, well, then we'll talk about that on Tuesday afternoon. Now, I'm not a legalist about it. If there's an urgent issue, obviously I'm going to handle it. But what the 10-block weekly schedule does, it allows you to stay focused without running from urgent to urgent to urgent and not getting anything done. You ever spent a whole day, you felt like you did all this stuff, but at the end of the day, like, what the heck did I get done? I don't think I got anything done today.
For sure.
That's because
Absolutely.
It's lack of focus.
Mm-hmm.
Focus stands for follow one course until successful. Follow one course until successful. So if you're going from task to task to task with no rhyme or reason, you're not going to be as productive.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty powerful system right there. Kind of divide each day into 2, and within each block, there are just certain tasks that you allow yourself to do on a weekly basis, and kind of allows you to get in a real routine, in a flow, and a habit. You're like, oh, okay, well, Friday mornings that's when I do my one-on-ones, and the more you kind of stick to that schedule, the more it just gets ingrained in who you are, and really just becomes a little bit easier to kind of work and flow into those projects. I know for myself, just avoiding distraction can really help me a lot. And I think that when you look at like people that really get a ton done, it might not necessarily be that they're giants of willpower. I'm sure they do have willpower, and I'm sure they do have an ability to focus. But I think they just avoid friction in their lives. They avoid the distraction. They find a quiet area within their home or their office where they can sit down and really focus on the work that means the most to them. For me, that means I use BlockSite on my computer. My partner has password protection on my phone for all the apps that distract me. So when I'm in my office, literally the only thing I can do is work, because I don't have access to any of the other stuff that actually distracts me. And for me, that's huge. It really is, because if you're doing work, but then you're checking TikTok every 30 seconds, and then you're doing work, and then you're looking up news on the Dallas Cowboys, like, you're not getting anything done. Like you said, focus. You have to stay focused on the task at hand. And if you're constantly allowing yourself to get distracted, you're not going to get nearly as much done over the course of 24 hours as people who don't. I've heard you talk a little bit about this and entrepreneurs making the correct hire. How can we as business owners make better hires for our business?
Well, I think better hiring starts again with better mindset about what you're trying to accomplish. So if you're going to hire someone, what is it that person is bringing of value? Are they bringing a certain dollar amount of value? Is it a certain function that they've got to do that it doesn't have direct revenue generation, connection? Like, what are they coming? What are you needing them for? So you got to be very, very clear on that. Now, running a hiring process is a process that I teach that is really, really, really important, because in a tight job market, when people are looking for opportunities, they're scrolling and looking through Indeed, they're on whatever job posting site they're looking for, and every single ad they read sounds just like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. They all sound exactly the same. And what they get in the mood, they get tired of listening to these or reading these job ads. And so they just hit apply. They hit apply. They hit apply. They're disconnected, and they're applying. And then you get, hey, we got 15 applications for this new position that we're hiring for. Blah, blah, that's great. And then you reach back out to them and it's crickets. Well, because they don't remember anything about your job ad. They just hit apply. They don't remember anything about it. So I teach, and we don't have time to go in today, but I do teach this 10-step hiring methodology that really has kind of pulled away all the fluff in the hiring and gets you right down to making sure that you hire the right person and that you onboard them correctly, because the hiring process is really, really important, but the onboarding is also really important, because if you went through a great process and then day one, the employee shows up and you're like, all right, we need to get you with Sally over in HR to get you some paperwork, but she's busy. So just sit here in the conference room. I'll get back to you in a couple of minutes.
Right.
Well, you just set a precedent for that person, and they're now going to think that that's how you expect them to operate. So another client success story. So I had a client whose entire staff turned over in about 6 weeks. It was a small company, but that's a lot. So his entire staff turned over, and it wasn't under good circumstances.
Right.
And it didn't all happen at once, but it all happened pretty quickly in about a 6-week period. So when I knew this was happening because he and I talked every single week. He said, man, this just happened. This just happened. I said, all right, it's time to put in a new hiring process. Today, he has a better team. He'll tell you, he said, I've got a better team than I've ever had in the history of being in business. He's been doing business for 20 years. He said, I've never had a business that had this tight of a team. So, for example, he'd never had an assistant before. And so he hired an assistant and a personal assistant, administrative assistant. And I said, okay, here's what you need to do. That first week that she's hired, you need to make sure that every single hour is accounted for in her first week. Like day 1, 9:00 a.m., what is she going to be doing? Who's she going to meet with? Day 2, et cetera. Go through the thing. And he's like, really? I said, I'm telling you, you do this, she will think that's how you operate everything. And then she will in turn assist you to build a company that operates that way. Well, guess what? She's been with him now for 90 days. And that's how she runs the company. And it only took that first week of setting the precedent correctly. So I think hiring starts with mindset, and you got to make sure you run a good process. But onboarding cannot be stressed enough. You got to onboard them right.
For sure. Yeah. You got to have a plan for that first week. You can't just put them in the conference room and give them a cup of coffee and say, I'll get back to you. Right. That's definitely not.
That happens every day.
Oh, it's not setting the tone. It's not setting the proper tone. And I agree. If you hire a rock star, a personal executive assistant, it can change your whole life. It can free up so much time for you to focus on the big picture stuff that you've been meaning to work on for years. I know I hired a full-time assistant for the first time coming up on 2 years ago. And just the amount of time that she has freed up in my day by monitoring my email, by handling my calendar, by posting to my social media accounts, and so many other things that she just knocks out of the park, that really just frees up my mental bandwidth to really think big picture and really focus on those high leverage tasks. A rock star executive assistant, for anyone out there who's making the income to make that hire make sense, I think can absolutely just change your entire business, change your entire life in a pretty short period of time. So let's say that we've made the right hire, and I've heard you talk about this, and I'd love for you to go a little bit deeper into it. We've made a hire that we're confident in. We've nailed the onboarding process. I've heard you talk about how when we're delegating tasks to our employees, it's important not only to say what to do, but also why they're doing it. And if you could talk a little bit about that.
I had an assistant. She's not with me anymore, but I had an assistant one time then, and part of her job was running my email campaigns. And so if everybody subscribes to my emails, they know that I send out a lot of emails, and they're high quality, that really good information in them. That it's not just a pitch fest. We're not trying to get people to buy stuff all the time. It's, hey, here's a guest I have on my podcast. You should check this out. Here's a book review you should check, and et cetera. But doing my emails are really, really important. So I sat her down, and we spent, I don't know, at my desk, probably about 3 to 5 hours of working on showing her how to do this. And we use Kajabi as our back end of our website and our email platform. And so she's sitting to my right, and we're going through this, and she's smart. She's obviously a smart lady. I hired her, and she's looking at this, and she's taking notes, and she understands how it's going on. And then at some point in there, I just got the sense that, like, she would do everything that I said to do, and she'd do it right. But I didn't think that she connected with why this was important. So I turned to her and I said, look, do you understand why you do this on this rather than this? And she goes, no, not really, but I'll do it. I was like, I get it. But I said, here's why. And then when I explained it to her, why you have to, check this box rather than this box, or do this rather than that, She went, oh, it all of a sudden illuminated. Now she completely understood the task. Now, with that story as a background, let me ask you a question. Is my assistant going to do a better job before or after I told her why? And the obvious answer is she's going to do a much better job once she understands the why.
100%.
Delegators, people who delegate, they confuse delegation with just assigning a task to somebody. They think that's delegation. That's not what delegation is. Delegation is assigning and trusting and empowering that person to do that task on your behalf. And they have to understand not only what it is, but why it's important, how to do it, and when it's due. And if you can do that, and especially the why part, they're going to perform at a higher level. I mean, we've all remember back when we were working at Burger King when we were teenagers or whatever, and had jobs where we worked for employers who told us to do stuff. And we're like, okay, whatever. And we did it, but we didn't understand why it was important. And I'm not saying as a snot-nosed teenager, we'd have done a better job, but if somebody had sat down and said, look, this is why you have to empty the grease trap in the fryer every night and do this terrible job. This is why. Okay, I'm probably going to do it 2 or 3% better than I would have done it before as a teenager. But as an adult, you're going to get 50 to 75% better output if they understand why this task has been delegated. That's important.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. And that's certainly something that most bosses do not do. They're just going to put 10, 15 tasks in Asana. They're going to send it to their employee and they're just going to expect it to get done. But if you really make that mind shift change and you take the time to explain to your employees, listen, this is what I need you to do. This is how to do it. But this is why it's important to the business. I do think that you will get a much greater output from your employees and maybe convert them, from a mercenary mindset to a missionary mindset, which I think is an important frame of mindset to get more out of people. Curious, Jason, you got a lot going on. You're a very productive guy, very successful guy. Do you ever feel resistance to the work you should be doing? Do you ever feel a little bit of laziness during your day? And if you do, what do you do to fight through this resistance and continue taking action?
Yeah, I think the human condition, our minds specifically, are inherently lazy, but not in the way that you might think. Our minds are designed, I think, to take the least amount of power to get things done. Mm-hmm. Which, if you look at what does lazy mean, that's kind of what physical lazy is. Like, I'm going to do the least amount of effort to get done what needs to be done. Well, our brains are kind of designed that way too. They're looking for the path of least resistance, which makes sense. It conserves power. Our car designers are designing the same thing. That's why cars are aerodynamic. It's about what can we do to take the least amount of energy to make this work. Our brains are designed that way. God designed us that way. That unfortunately translates into a lot of adults and teenagers, especially, being lazy physically. They misunderstand that their brain is telling them just look for the path of least resistance. And like, okay, well, I'm also going to take the physical path of least resistance. That's not what I mean. But your question is, do I find myself sometimes resisting the work that needs to be done? Yeah, I think I do. And I think what my mind is looking for is there an easier path through this that doesn't require me to exert as much energy? And I think that's referred to as efficiency rather than laziness. So I look for ability to be efficient. Now, what is the enemy of efficiency? Complexity. The enemy of efficiency is complexity. So when we have complex days and I'm actually in the middle of a one like this right now. I'm hoping to submit an LOI for an acquisition today. I've got that legal matter that I just referred to earlier. I've still got some things that I've not done this week that needed to get done in terms of connecting people that I promised I would connect. There's a lot of what I refer to as open cycles. It's very complex right now. So that is the enemy of me trying to be efficient. So if I have efficiency, I'm not able to be as efficient as I want. What bubbles up is I'm just not going to do anything. And this is what happens. We get to this point where we got so much going on. We're like, just screw it. I'm done. Like, I'm just going to take the afternoon off, call my assistant, cancel all my appointments. I'm out. I'm done. Well, that might feel good for the moment. And frankly, you might need to do that every 90 days or so. Just give yourself that mental health break. But when we are feeling resistance to work that needs to get done, we need to check ourselves. Is this laziness, like physical laziness? Is this translating into physical laziness? or is this just natural efficiency that we're trying to figure out? And I think for most of us as entrepreneurs, it's just natural efficiency. We're just trying to figure out what's the most efficient way to do it. Not being lazy, but what's the most efficient way.
I love that. I love that. And I agree. The less complex you can make your days, the more productive you're going to be. And if you've got a to-do list with 29 items on it, there's a good chance that you might get none of that done, because you might just feel so much overwhelmed that you're going to head to the driving range at 2 p.m. And that's going to be the end of the productivity. I think that is really sound advice. Jason Duncan, you absolutely brought it today. I really appreciate your time, and just curious, where can everyone keep up with all you're up to these days?
Well, I want to encourage everybody to go to my website, especially people who are interested in that 10 block weekly schedule. So if you want a really free resource that will help you build a better schedule to stay focused, go to therealjasonduncan.com/10 block, the number 10, 10 block. And it's a free resource. You get immediate access to it. You don't have to wait to get it an email later. You get immediate access. There's a 45-minute training video, plus there's downloadable resources of PDFs and templates that you can use to start doing that. So therealjasonduncan.com/10 block. And then if you're on social media, you can find me on YouTube or Instagram or LinkedIn at The Real Jason Duncan.
There it is, guys. Definitely go give Jason a follow. His content is absolute fire. You will get a lot from it. This has been Persistence Playbook. And here is your weekly reminder that you will feel laziness this week. You will feel resistance to the work you know you should be doing. Acknowledge that resistance and take action anyway. We'll see you next week.